Hey guys, so I just wanted to do a little video for you all today, answering this question that was proposed by Amplify Your Voice, which is a organization that works to get comprehensive sex education for teens, and they're really awesome, and you should check them out if you have not heard of them. And they posed this question today on Facebook, asking if parents should be held liable for a rape that happens at a teen party. And I'm guessing they're probably referencing the Steubenville case, which you probably heard about, that happened actually in Ohio, which is where I live, and that went to trial in like January, February, and the verdict was given in the end of March, so about a month ago. And I think it's a really interesting question because it kind of brings forward both our ideas about like policy and the law in terms of like what parents are responsible for their kids, but also like ethics and morality and like how violence happens and who's really responsible and the underlying causes. And I think it's really important that we ask questions like this and examine this stuff, you know? So I'm just kind of going to give my little opinion here. Feel free to disagree, and if you want, tell me in the comments what you think about this question and what you would answer. So, should parents be held responsible? I think to some extent. I think maybe the general, overall, broad spectrum picture, if we look at it that way, we could say that parents are kind of part of the responsibility. Because part of rape culture, which I've talked about on this channel before, is that rape is normalized, and also with this comes the fact that we don't talk about sexual violence. So parents typically aren't having these types of conversations with their teenagers, and also the messages that they're probably sending their teenagers are not always the most positive. I know that with my parents personally, we never talked about like sexual violence or anything. And if there was any conversation about it, it would be more something like, be careful, don't go out and get raped, and don't stay out, you know, late at night by yourself or whatever, more like along the lines of victim blaming stuff. Which I'm not trying to say that my parents were horrible people or bad parents or something. Not at all. I don't think I would have been prepared to properly handle a situation like this a few years ago before I learned myself all about sexual violence and rape culture, etc. So I think parents, because they're also part of socialization, they're part of how we learn about society and culture and the social world that we live in. They are the ones that help us navigate that, along with things like the media, our peer groups, our teachers, etc. But parents are a huge part of that, and we get a lot of our values and our morals and our ethics from our parents directly. Religion's a great example of this. A lot of times parents will pass down religion to their children, and a lot of times the children will ultimately take up this belief. And you know, it may not be a parent, and of course a lot of teenagers rebel and go against their parents and stuff, but a lot of times still their core ethics and the core of the morality does closely align with that of their parents. And I think with this, because parents are a part of how we learn to think about things, so I think they can play a role in that sense, but I don't think ultimately parents are responsible for their teenagers' actions. You know, I think we're autonomous people. We make our own decisions, and at some point you have to take responsibility for them. Now, even though the law kind of says that, you know, you're kind of responsible for yourself before you're 18, but you're kind of not at the same time. Because parents actually can get in trouble for child delinquency and things like that. The parents actually can get punished for their children's actions. And I think that's a little bit absurd, because unless the parent is telling the child directly that they should be doing these things, why are we forcing the parents to take responsibility for something they didn't do? I understand that a child is kind of seen as an extension of a parent, but ultimately it's not. You know, ultimately we're all our own people. We all make our own choices. So I don't think holding parents responsible is really the right answer. And sure, I think parents in the Steubenville situation, I think that they could have probably prevented it, and they probably could have done something about it once they found out about this, because it seems like a lot of people were just kind of keeping quiet and sitting on this and not acting. And I think that that is a problem. You know, I think it's a problem that the parents didn't ultimately take control and say, hey, there's something fucked up going on here. We need to look in and see what happened. And even the circumstances of this party, you know, if adults were around, if there was a parent somewhere present, it probably wouldn't have gone down exactly this way. So I think that parents and teens need to have more open communication and have honesty between each other, and have it be so that the parents aren't going to just like ultimately put out their iron fist and punish the teens for being honest. Because I've been in this situation before too, where it's like you want to be honest with your parents, but you know if you're honest you're going to get in trouble. So what do you do at that point? I think that that's where parents need to be more understanding and have some kind of policy where their teenagers can come to them with something and they won't get in trouble for it. And I think if this happens, then parents will be a lot more involved in teens' lives. I think if there was this dialogue of honesty going on here on both ends, on parents and teens ends, I think that we would see a lot less problems happening around a lot of different issues, including sex and sexual violence, because I think that you can learn from each other and you can help to foster safety and education and honesty and courage and all kinds of wonderful magical things. And I think that when there's all of this tension and non-honesty, or even the situations where parents know something has gone on, but they don't say anything and the teen doesn't either, and like blah, 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 I think it just turns into this clusterfuck, but really it could be something like amazing. So I think really parents just need to listen to their teens more and be more accepting of things that go on in teenagehood, like drinking, for example, and having sex. You know, it's things that parents, I think, like to kind of pretend like they don't happen, or beyond pretending, just really believing that their kid is a different kid, the perfect kid, the good kid that isn't going to engage in these behaviors, which we know is largely not true. Most teenagers will drink and most teenagers will have sex. So I think that parents being kind of honest with themselves, as well as allowing their teens to be honest with them and creating this open dialogue where they're not going to get in trouble for telling their mom or their dad about experiences that they're having. I think that this would create prevention. This would be a mode of prevention, and because of this, there would be a lot less problems going on. Because, like, for example, if someone's thinking about having sex for the first time, they may go to their parents and ask them questions. The parents can then answer those questions and make sure they're being safe about it and make sure they're protecting themselves from STDs and pregnancy. I think the same thing goes for sexual violence too. You know, if teens went to their parents and talk about situations that have happened, or questions that they have about things that they've seen their friends do or happen to their friends or what have you, and they're not worried about getting in trouble for talking about this because, oh my god, it happened at a party where people were drunk and my parents can't know I was at a party where people were drunk, because then they'll probably think I was drinking, and regardless if I was or I wasn't, then my parents are still going to assume that I was, and so I can't tell them because I'm going to get in trouble. See, I think that's the dialogue that happens in teens' heads, and I think that if we didn't have to worry about that, we would see a lot more honesty between the teenagers and the parents. And I think parents, you can really prevent a lot of bad things from happening in your teens' lives and in your greater community too, because honesty is a cool thing where people are actually like fucking real and they're not hiding, and they're like, hey, let's bring out this problem and fix it, and then, you know, that's how shit gets done. So anyway, I know I kind of went on for a little while, but on the Amplify Your Voice Facebook page, they put this into a poll question, and everyone voted that no, the parents are not involved, which I think that with the choices that they provided, I would agree. I would say that no, the parents aren't really like directly responsible for teenage perpetration of rape. Yes, we do need to hold rapists responsible for their actions and not all of this other stuff like, oh, she was drinking, or oh, she was wearing slutty clothes, or whatever. And I think that if parents too can understand this, and everyone, law enforcement and doctors and police officers, I think we would be so much more well off. But I think this honesty dialogue thing would help so much, because, you know, there are teenagers that have parents that are law enforcement agents and police officers and doctors and teachers. So I think that if all of these people could have honest conversations, then we would see a lot of cool changes and things happen, and people would be able to confront problems because they'd understand problems and they wouldn't like run away from problems. Yeah. So thanks guys so much for watching, and I will see you next video.